Okay. So our next speaker, okay, is a feasibility point. It can happen. Here it is. So Josef Sifuentes is postdoctoral fellow at the Quran Institute at NYU, recent Rice Ph.D. He didn't give the title, I did. From the barrios of Houston to a postdoctoral position at NYU, utilizing bridges, avoiding detours. How did I make it? Joseph, please.
Morning. So it's an honor to be back in Texas, for one thing, and it's an honor to address such an esteemed collection of scientists and educators, especially being born and raised in Texas. So it really is an honor for me to be here. So Dr. Thapi asked for me to give the story of how did I get from the barrios of Houston to NYU. And that story only takes a couple of hours, so bear with me. Well, it starts off with parents. For me, one of my earliest memories is my dad working with flashcards with me. And the flashcards were arranged like dots on a domino, and that's how I learned to add and count and subtract. Now, of course, my parents don't have any training in mathematics. My dad had found a book somewhere about teaching babies math, and so apparently I knew how to add and subtract before I knew how to really talk in sentences. But what really was a fork in the road for me, I had a second grade teacher that had a parent-teacher conference, and I thought I was in trouble because I was often in trouble. But actually, she said, you really should put your student into Vanguard programs or specialized programs within HISD because he's talented. And that started a divergence for me and pretty much everyone else from my neighborhood. And I was set down on a road that took me to Lamar High School. And Lamar High School in Houston is one of the only two schools in Houston that has the International Baccalaureate program. Now, Dr. Thapi mentioned about separate but not equal. Separate but not equal is also a rule that's found in Houston high schools. There are two high schools in Houston that have the IB program. The rest do not. So you can say that they're not equal in the number of AP courses they offer. They're not equal in the number of IB courses they offer. They're not equal in the average SAT scores, and they're not equal into the colleges that their students are usually accepted into. They say I was exceptional because I went to Lamar, which is in River Oaks. I'm not from River Oaks. I'm from Magnolia Park in the southeast part of Houston. The school I was zoned to is about 99% Mexican-American. Now, that was made a big difference for me. Coming from Lamar High School and having completed the International Baccalaureate Honors Diploma, I was well prepared when I went to Rice. Now, compare that, often there are one or two from mostly minority schools in Houston that do go to Rice. And many of them who do major in STEM fields drop out, change majors to social sciences or political sciences or art. And not that there's anything wrong with these positions, but often they switch out for the wrong reasons, because they can't handle the work, because they weren't prepared for the work. I was well prepared. Another big issue that Lamar High School helped me with is oftentimes minority students, especially coming from majority minority schools or from majority minority cities and towns like the Rio Grande Valley or San Antonio or parts of Houston and other parts of Texas, is that there's a culture shock, right? I mean, imagine the story that Valerie Taylor was telling, but from a student's perspective, and you're one of the only males in this all-female school. So there's this culture shock. Well, I already went through that. I went through that in high school. In fact, in high school, I suffered quite a bit of a culture shock because I had many students tell me quite directly that it was very odd that a Mexican-American was in their class, in the IB classes. Usually they're in the other classes or at the other schools. I had several students tell me that the only interactions they really had with Mexican-Americans were as gardeners or as laborers. And this was something that was, several students kind of brought to my attention. So I went through the culture shock. I learned how to overcome it before I got to Rice University. So when I was in high school, I made it a point to say, well, I am in your classes, I am as good as you are, and if not, I may be even better than you are. So I went to Rice with this kind of an attitude. So I was well prepared, I had already went through the culture shock, but even going to Rice, it never crossed my mind the idea of graduate school, the idea of a career in academia. I think for many minorities who go to undergraduate, even though you're not going to a technical school, we think about it as a technical school. You pick majors that sound like good jobs. What major sounds like a good paying job? Math doesn't sound like a good paying job. engineering does. I actually majored in engineering when I first went in and changed majors to math when I met Dr. Tapia in applied mathematics. Now, Dr. Tapia found me and says, Joseph, you're good. You should go to grad school. Well, what's that all about? So one of the things that really changed the direction of where I was going was that, one, I got involved in undergraduate education through the AGEP program at Rice University. So I was exposed to what research was before I considered grad school. I had worked in research. I had done undergraduate research. And in fact, I'll tell you a story. When I first went to Rice, I got a letter from the master of the college. At Rice, it's organized by residential colleges. And the master of the college was Dr. Enrique Barrera, Mexican-American from Texas, who's here in the audience. I also got a letter from the vice president of student affairs, Zenaida Camacho, Mexican-American from Texas. And before I went, someone said, you really should go find Dr. Tapia, Mexican-American from California. So I got all these contacts. I got 2 letters from Mexican-Americans, and I met another Mexican-American. I thought, wow, Rice is full of Mexicans. Of course, they were the only 3 I found out. But like I said before, there's many points where my path kind of diverged, and I find myself very fortunate to have been in the intersection of these professors, because Dr. Barrera introduced me to many of the faculty in the mechanical engineering department, of which he's a faculty, and I started doing undergraduate research in the mechanical engineering department. I met Dr. Tapia, and I started doing an undergraduate project with Dr. Tapia, combining art, mathematics, finite element code, and hot rods. It was working on this project that I found out kind of the power and the creativity and the beauty of mathematics, and I eventually changed majors to mathematics, went on to get a Ph.D. in mathematics, and now find myself in New York at the Cron Institute doing research in mathematics. Thanks.
Thank you, Joseph. I have some slides here I'm going to go through real quick. So this is kind of a summary that I wrote. I'll go over, basically my concluding remarks. But here, so American preeminence in STEM is seriously being challenged. We all know that. Now here's an interesting thing that we have to remember, that those groups that are the most underrepresented in STEM areas are the fastest growing. We better deal with this problem. K-12 education, we've done some wonderful things in Texas. I'm proud of that, but it's still not in good shape. Now, this is an important issue that I always argue when I give a talk, because everybody's going to think that we need Josephs and women and Valeries for the health of the discipline. No. Underrepresentation endangers the health of the nation, the health of the economy, not the health of the discipline. Universities play games in counting things. Okay, I'm on the NSF advisory committee. In fact, I was on the NSF board. So look, implementing accountability for activities. Let's not play the game, continue to play the game. So here's a false positive that happened last year. According to the National Science Foundation, UC Berkeley led the nation last year in the production of underrepresented minority PhDs in STEM fields with 37. The truth is 35 of the 37 were not domestic. They were foreign students. Okay? Yet NSF allows this to happen with their very sloppy definitions. Someone has played the role. We don't get to make the definitions. They do. State and national are saying, my own university, UCLA and Berkeley in math, have very few undergraduates, minorities, no graduate students, no faculty, okay? If a public, and yet, California has the largest minority population in the country, Texas has the highest percentage, okay? If a public flagship university is not responsible or not responsive to the needs of the state, then both state and national funding should be cut. UCLA and Berkeley are doing some good things, and they're doing some bad things. Are we, Texas A&M, as public flagship institutions and UT Austin, doing better than Berkeley and UCLA on those issues? No. What can we do? We can't wait for K-12. It'll never happen. Can't wait for K-12 to be fixed. Texas flagship schools can make a difference for the state, region, and the nation. We represent thousands of STEM undergraduates like Joseph, okay? Texas has the potential to either lead the nation in creative and innovative solutions of these complex educational problems, or lead the nation down a path of disaster. California, too. What can we do? I mentioned the loss of the precious few. Joseph mentioned so many of his friends at Rice who came in STEM and changed majors. Migration. Don't go to graduate school. Joseph wasn't going to go to graduate school. Okay? We can deal with that at our Tier 1 schools. So here's a picture of the building I live in. The American Master Society this year gave us an award for making a difference. We made the biggest difference of any school in the country, of any Tier 1 school. We reduced 35 underrepresented minorities in the last 25 years. In 1986, there were 8 underrepresented minorities produced in mathematics, and Rice produced 4. Okay, that's 50%. We have an AGEP program. Now, the bottom line is what I want to say. In the last 5 years, we had 6 NSF graduate fellowships were awarded to minorities. This is not a minority fellowship. This is a competitive. 6. I'm not sure if anybody in the country has had 6, period, let alone 6 to minorities. Okay? 75 underrepresented minority PhDs in the last 15 years. My guidelines for working with STEM underrepresented minorities, and here I'm describing Joseph, is undergraduate admissions. Admission enough at Rice? Enough. No. Is a Rice undergraduate degree or any undergraduate degree enough? No. Is graduate admission enough? No. Is graduate degree enough? No. Is a meaningful postdoc like Joseph is serving? No. Is respected faculty position, A&M, UT, still mentoring needs to be done, but it's close enough. I'll be happy at that point. Here's some recent minority PhDs. Joseph, Russell, Mikhail, Travis, 2 African Americans, 2 Mexican Americans. 3 of the 4 are from Texas. They were 3 of the 4 also were Rice undergraduates. So here's a satisfying aspect of our minority PhD productivity. This is important. See, our faculty wants to produce students who will become faculty at Princeton. Okay? It's not going to happen. Okay? But they want, and they dream. What we have done in producing some of our minority 2 are on the faculty at Texas Southern, 2 are on the faculty at University of Texas Pan Am, 3 are there, University of Texas El Paso, 5. So Robert Nelson, who may be in the audience, Diana Natalicio, president at UTEP, Robert Nelson, president of UTEP, of University of Texas Pan Am, they say the following to me. Richard, your students as faculty are making great contributions to our school. Do you have any more? Do you have any more? In terms of global goodness added, the students that we produced at Rice, who are now faculty at UTEP and UT Pan Am and Texas Southern, are adding global goodness to the world. Okay, now I want to say a personal statement. I've been a member of TAMEST since inception. I've been on the board for 2 terms. I've always been highly critical of TAMEST because we've never had an underrepresented minority presenter or a session on underrepresentation. Notice that this session is on underrepresentation, and all 5 are underrepresented minorities. I thank Paul Barbara for making this happen. May this TAMEST first be a part of his legacy. Thank you, Paul, very much. Okay, I thank you, and let's have some questions.